In a stunning display of geopolitical miscalculation, the fragile order in the Strait of Hormuz has disintegrated into a storm of drone swarms, naval standoffs, and diplomatic humiliation. What was briefly heralded as a masterstroke of deal-making has now proven to be nothing more than a lit match tossed into a pool of gasoline. While the administration in Washington continues to broadcast messages of total victory and overwhelming force, the reality on the water tells a drastically different story. The catalyst for this rapidly escalating crisis was the seizure of an Iranian commercial vessel. Under direct orders from the White House, the United States Navy intercepted a cargo ship peacefully transiting international waters toward Iranian ports. According to military statements, the destroyer involved fired multiple volleys from its deck gun into the vessel's engine room, disabling propulsion before Marines boarded the ship. The official justification was enforcement of a naval blockade aimed at strangling economic lifelines. But from the perspective of the Iranian leadership, this was not enforcement. It was state-sanctioned piracy and a clear violation of the fragile ceasefire that had been brokered just weeks earlier. The response was not only swift but calculated to inflict maximum strategic discomfort. Within hours, Iranian command announced a coordinated counterattack utilizing swarms of unmanned aerial vehicles targeting American naval assets operating in the narrow choke point of the Gulf. The message broadcast from Tehran was unambiguous. If American forces open fire on commercial vessels, they should expect to find themselves dodging a relentless hail of precision projectiles. The illusion of a dominant superpower dictating terms from the deck of a carrier was shattered the moment those first drones appeared on the radar horizon. This is the central tragedy of the current policy known as maximum pressure. By demanding capitulation through brute naval force, the administration has handed its adversary the perfect justification for asymmetric warfare. Instead of bringing the opposing side to its knees, the action has forced the American fleet into a defensive crouch. Warships in one of the world's most vital energy corridors are now operating under a perpetual state of high alert, forced to expend tremendous resources simply to hold their position. The economic ripples of this misadventure are already washing ashore at home with brutal efficiency. Insurance premiums for tankers navigating the region have skyrocketed, and energy markets are jittery. The promise of lower fuel prices and economic stability has evaporated, replaced by the specter of a prolonged energy shock. This domestic pain translates directly into political vulnerability. Internal polling and public sentiment reflect a stark reality. Confidence in economic stewardship is eroding at a precipitous rate. Even among traditional supporters, there is a growing murmur of discontent as the gap between campaign promises of peace and the reality of a shooting war in the Gulf widens. The man who promised to end foreign entanglements is now seen as the architect of a fresh, costly crisis. The strategic genius of the Iranian approach lies in its rejection of a traditional naval confrontation. No one in Tehran expects to sink a carrier strike group in a Hollywood-style duel of broadsides. That is a fool's errand against the most expensive navy ever assembled. Instead, they have embraced a doctrine of calculated attrition that targets the one resource no superpower can replenish infinitely: time and political capital. The tactics are a masterclass in cost efficiency. First, the deployment of low-cost loitering munitions forces defensive systems to respond with interceptors that cost exponentially more than the incoming threat. The economic calculus of firing a multi-million-dollar missile to neutralize a cheap drone is not sustainable warfare. It is a form of fiscal self-destruction. Secondly, the use of high-speed small craft and quiet submersibles turns the coastal waters into a nervous maze for even the most advanced destroyer captains. These assets do not need to sink a ship to be effective. They merely need to exist, forcing crews to remain at battle stations, burning through fuel and mental stamina. Exhaustion is a weapon as sharp as any warhead. Third, there is the hidden arsenal of cruise missiles specifically engineered to hunt down the high-value surveillance drones that the American military relies upon for eyes in the sky. Watching a piece of equipment worth tens of millions of dollars fall from the sky, destroyed by a system costing a tiny fraction of that, is a symbolic dagger aimed directly at the heart of the myth of technological invincibility. Every lost airframe is a budget line item and a headline of embarrassment. The grand strategy in Tehran is defined by an unshakable calm. In a recent address marking a significant military anniversary, the nation's most senior leadership figure spoke not with the bluster of a reality show host, but with the quiet confidence of someone who understands the nature of a long war. The speech contained no desperate pleas for relief. Instead, it was filled with promises that those testing the resolve of the nation would taste many more bitter defeats. This is not empty propaganda. It is a strategic declaration that the nation is prepared to endure economic hardship and military pressure far longer than the American public is willing to tolerate rising prices and casualty reports. The leadership operates on a different clock. While Washington scrambles for a quick victory to parade before an upcoming election cycle, Iran is content to let the calendar pages turn, knowing that each passing day of a tense gulf erodes the domestic standing of the man who started the confrontation. This mismatch in timelines is the hidden engine of the entire crisis. The leader in Washington is racing against a fixed deadline. He requires a neat, televised resolution that allows him to declare mission accomplished and pivot back to domestic issues. He needs a deal, any deal, to stop the bleeding at the pump and in the polls. The leader in Iran needs the opposite. He needs the tension to simmer just below the boil, hot enough to hurt the global economy and frustrate the American military, but not so hot that it triggers a catastrophic, full-scale war. This is the art of boiling the frog from the other side of the pot. The Israeli dimension adds yet another layer of complexity and danger. Facing his own set of domestic political and legal challenges, the Prime Minister in Jerusalem finds strategic value in a region that remains unsettled. A prolonged state of conflict shifts focus away from internal troubles and reinforces a narrative of necessary vigilance against shared foes. Rocket fire across the northern border and airstrikes in response ensure that the regional fire is never fully extinguished, even when ceasefires are supposedly in place. This creates a volatile triangulation where one capital is trying to sprint to the exit, another is digging in for the long haul, and a third is discreetly fanning the flames to keep the fire burning. The regional allies, particularly the wealthy Gulf states, are watching this unfold with growing alarm. They have witnessed expensive American-built air defense systems being overwhelmed or outmaneuvered by inexpensive drone technology. The economic logic of defending the sky has been turned upside down. As a result, there is a quiet but frantic shopping spree underway, as these nations seek alternative suppliers in Asia and Europe. They are looking for cost-effective ways to stop swarms without bankrupting their national treasuries. This shift is a devastating indictment of the current American posture. Allies who once trusted implicitly in the security umbrella are now hedging their bets, wondering if the price of admission to that umbrella is simply too high given the low-cost nature of the threats they now face daily. Even as explosions echo across the water and gunfire warns tankers away from the strait, the farce of diplomacy plays out in distant capitals. Delegations meet in neutral locations, floating proposals and counterproposals. The American side hints at a grand declaration, a historic peace deal that will be signed in a flourish of photo opportunities. Yet the Iranian negotiators exhibit the same patience as their military commanders. They review documents, they consult with their capital, and they refuse to be rushed. They have made it clear that no amount of pressure at sea will force them to surrender their core strategic capabilities or accept a deal that does not include tangible relief from economic restrictions. They will not be blackmailed at the negotiating table while being shot at on the water. The stark reality is that the so-called art of the deal has met its match in the art of strategic endurance. The strategy of seizing a ship to project strength has instead projected vulnerability. It has exposed the limits of naval power in an era of cheap, mass-produced precision weaponry. It has united a fractured domestic audience in the opposing nation against a common external aggressor. Most critically, it has handed the initiative over to the very forces it was meant to intimidate. The man in the White House finds himself in a position he despises, reacting. He must react to the price of oil. He must react to the drone attack reports. He must react to the fact that the clock on the wall is ticking far louder for him than it is for the resilient leadership across the ocean. This is modern conflict in its most distilled form. It is not about flags planted on beaches or the tonnage of sunk ships. It is about the slow, grinding erosion of will. It is about forcing the opponent to hemorrhage dollars on defense while you spend pennies on offense. It is about understanding that in a contest of endurance, the stronger party is often the one who wants it less, or more accurately, the one who can afford to want it for longer. The lessons unfolding in the Gulf are brutal and clear. The world is witnessing a shift in the balance of power, not through a single decisive battle, but through 1,000 small, calculated cuts. The The message from the Persian Gulf is not one of panic, but of grim, unwavering patience. And for those who thought a show of force would bring a swift resolution, the response is being written in the contrails of drones and the steady rise of the price of a barrel of crude. The end of this chapter is far from written, but the opening pages reveal a story of arrogance meeting the immovable wall of resolve.